All right, good afternoon, everybody. It is Wednesday, May the 1st. It is 3:02 p.m. We'll call the Housing and Economic Development Committee meeting to order. We are joined by all members of the committee. Taylor, any public comment today? No public comment. Just a change to the agenda. It was requested by the Chamber and CVB that we move the Visit Ithaca annual report to our June meeting. So that item will happen in June. Apologies for the confusion. And other than that, any other changes to the agendas by members of the committee? All right, seeing none. Let's first do the minutes approval from April 3rd. If I could have someone move those, please. Moved by Ann, seconded by Veronica. Any changes or discussion around the minutes from April the 3rd? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, those minutes are accepted unanimously. I see Lisa Holmes and Bridget on as well, so County Administrator's report. Lisa, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Greg. I just wanted to provide a quick update from where we left off from last week's, or felt like last month's HED meeting, in the conversation around the expanding shelter and talk of low barrier shelter, or Code Blue 365. After that conversation, a meeting was convened by the Continuum of Care, Liddy Barger, and there were several representatives from the county, the city, and the Human Services Coalition and COC attending, and created a group charge, which is to create an action plan, timeline and budget to implement a mechanism to expand emergency shelter services to provide Code Blue style or low barrier access to shelter stays for people who are or will be living outdoors in encampment spaces or other unsheltered locations that are or will be impacted by land use policy or other encampment remediation efforts throughout the non-winter months. And the timeline is to come up with a proposal by mid-July for consideration by this committee and in the budget process for 2025. So those conversations are underway, and the group plans to meet about every 2 weeks to try to have this conversation. So that was, I'd be happy to answer any questions if folks have questions on that topic.
Any questions from members of the committee? Veronica? Oh, I was just going to say, I appreciate the quick call to action. I know that there's many priorities, and this is one of them, obviously, but it sounds like there's a timeline and a process, and the appropriate people convene. So my appreciation for putting that together. So I just wanted to express my thanks for moving as quickly as we can on that, and it seems like a reasonable timeline, and appreciate the thoughts of including it in our 2025 budget conversation. Sure. Veronica? Thank you, and I also want to thank Liddy and Cindy for pulling us together through the HSC, or is the convening body. Great. Liddy, also thank you as well, and if there's anything you'd like to add, feel free to jump into the conversation. Veronica, did you have a question for Lisa?
Yeah. Can you tell us how this group that just convened interacts with, I don't have the words because I'm confused. Okay, so I've heard tell over the past several months of multiple different groups, working groups of some kind that involve people from the city and the county and are working on homelessness and or the encampments and or something and I can't remember what all they are, but could you like give us the roster of these groups as it stands right now? Just for
Well,
notification?
Sure. I think I'm aware of two kind of short-term efforts that were, one that we heard about at the last meeting, which involved the our planning department that was trying to provide and did provide this group with some estimates around number of people in shelter to help us come up with figures for how large we need to plan a homeless shelter. So that I know that Katie and her staff convened and met with folks from the city and the COC to go over those numbers, and as well as DSS staff to go over those numbers and try to make sure that we were planning appropriately. So that was, I don't know, a couple of meetings maybe, and that's not an ongoing working group. And this working group is really just, time limited and focused on this proposal through July 15th. If there are others, I'm not aware of them.
Okay. Did there not used to be some kind of city, county encampment and or homelessness working, I don't know if it's a working group, but group meeting that was discussed like at the end of last year, beginning of this year? Am I making things up?
So when we had a homeless services coordinator, Tammy Baker convened a meeting where that was, it was discussed about where we were at in terms of issues around unsheltered homelessness. That was convened once at the end of, I'm losing track of time, but I think it was toward the end of 2023, and reconvened one more time in 2024 to provide an update about where we were around sheltering.
There's been some conversation, I think, around the outreach worker program and those relations. I don't necessarily know if a working group or formal committee, more of a convening of partners in various conversations. And I mean, I know that there's been a few of those, but nothing of a formal nature.
Now, I can speak to that as well. So with the community outreach worker program that was formerly run by Family and Children's Services, there has been a reconvening of those stakeholders who contribute into that program to issue or reissue an RFP and combine that program with the rural outreach program. So that, if you want to say, group has met solely around the RFP writing and putting the RFP out and reviewing applications.
Any additional questions for Lisa on this topic? I see that we're also joined by Kit Kephart. Kit, thanks for joining. Don't mean to put you on the spot, but just didn't know if you wanted to maybe provide an update as Code Blue has ended and some of the things that you're seeing in your world as it relates to the work that you and your team are doing.
Sure, absolutely. And I apologize for being late. My state computer was not connecting for some reason, so that's why I'm late. I was planning on being here. So just to give people kind of a sense of where we're at, we are, as of the most current census that we have about 85 people under THA, which is temporary housing assistance, that are sheltered. That's 79 adults and 6 kids. Our most recent Code Blue night was last Thursday. We had 32 people who came in under the Code Blue sheltering, 29 adults and 3 children. And since, just to give people some perspective about THA, I know that we had some questions about there's always the transition from when Code Blue goes away. People tend to come in and apply for temporary housing assistance. Since the 15th of April, we've conducted new THA eligibility assessments on 112 people. Now that's comprised of a mix of people who were previously in Code Blue as well as new applicants. We don't have a way completely to know if people have been sheltered under Code Blue. So we've had quite a number of people coming in, and we assume a lot of those are Code Blue folks. We're running about half and half, that we're seeing about half of those approvals be approved, or half of those eligibility assessments be approved, and about half denied, which again, may speak to the Code Blue population. And we've seen, about an average of around, an average gain of around 30 THA individuals during the transition, and an average loss of about 122 Code Blue people. So, and again, with Code Blue, we don't always know, we don't have a way to track really where people have gone or what their circumstance is. So that's kind of a quick overview of where things are at with shelter. The staff at St. John's are currently preparing for the THA, what is mostly going to be a THA season. We could still run into some Code Blue nights as we go through the spring, but they're preparing for the THA season. We've changed. We do more congregate sheltering, which means group sheltering during the Code Blue season, and so we're paring that back and doing less of that during the THA season. So they're getting ready. Also doing, as much as they can, some outreach. We also have some outreach that happens through Adult Protective Services Division, although encampment outreach is fairly limited right now because we have heard through the police force that it's pretty unsafe. So unless people are going out in a group, there's not a whole lot of that happening. We are doing significant street outreach, trying to really connect with people and encourage people to come in and have assistance coming in to apply for THA. And that's probably kind of a summary for right now of kind of where we're at with this transition between Code Blue and the THA season.
I really appreciate the information, Kit. Seems like you've all been busy. Any questions for Kit?
Just one question. Thank you for the update. And yeah, it sounds like you and DSS have been doing a lot. Since you're not able to track like what has happened to Code Blue participants after Code Blue ends, what organizations might have people who are tracking that or following up with some of those folks if that is happening?
Sure. So St. John's as the shelter provider is whenever people are receptive, they are doing case management with people and trying to support people. I'm sure that other private agencies are working with those people. The thing to remember about Code Blue sheltering is that people don't have to provide information about themselves. Now, many do, and so there is some capacity in those situations to try to connect and try to see if we can support. But there's also people that really don't provide information or that have been in shelter, and so the shelter knows them, but when approached, they really decline any sort of supports or intervention. So we don't really have a way to track. Part of the challenge is we don't necessarily know all of who those people are that are sheltered under Code Blue. Again, the shelter has some knowledge, but what people share with us is limited. So if people are reaching out to other private agencies, there may not be a complete connection between who we might have reported as under Code Blue and who is being worked with, what the identifiers are when somebody goes to private agencies. But certainly all of our local private agencies are engaging with families in need. So.
Great. Well, Kit, thank you very much. And Lisa, anything else as it relates to the county administration?
I think that covers it. Thank you.
All right, I appreciate it. Liddy, if I may, if you're still there, just wondering if you maybe had a quick update while we're on the topic as it relates to the housing surge and things going on in your world?
Sure. So the surge is surging. There are currently 33 people who we anticipate are fully ready, 100% going to be moving in, and there's another 7 people who are in some stage of getting ready. It is going really well. It's been very, there's been all of these things that we've learned as a community by doing this weekly check-in around 40 names every week. We've been able to, for example, keep really good track of where people who exited Code Blue ended up, if they did not end up going through the THA process. So every week we're keeping track of like where people are, and that's giving us a good sense of migration for folks for the future. We are starting to think about planning our next surge using what we've learned from this surge. And I would say everything's going to plan at this time.
Thanks, Lydia. That's a great update. Could you just give a 30-second overview of what we mean by surge, just for those that maybe are joining for the first time?
Sure. So housing surge is a model that has its origins in disaster response, so FEMA type disaster response, where you have a sort of quantifiable group of people who are all in the same situation. So for us, it's the crisis of homelessness. Basically the concept is to surge people by reducing all potential barriers that can be reduced by the system, sort of like smoothing down the road, making sure everything is as seamless as possible on the back end, and then very closely keeping track of that by name list. We use a by name list. There's a long process about it, all the way into the entry and beyond into that housing. In a time-limited fashion. So the goal is to get 40 people into housing. On June 1st, they'll be in the housing, and then start again with another by-name list of people who we are working to surge into housing.
Great. I appreciate the update as well. Thanks to you for joining into the meeting today. Any questions for Lydia at this time, or are we good to move on to the next agenda item? All right. Thanks, Lisa. Thank you, Lydia. Next up, we have our arts, culture, and tourism section of the agenda. We've got our tourism quarterly update, and I'll turn it over to Nick from our planning department.
Thanks, Greg. Keep it quick. You've got in your packet on page 16 the memo describing activity over the last quarter for the tourism program. First up is the room tax update in the first quarter, which runs from December 1st to the end of February. We collected $429,478, slightly up from 2023 and in line with where we expect to be for this year's budget. So that's all good news. We'll keep you up to date on that. Next report will come in about 3 months. STPB members have been busy over the last few weeks reviewing grant applications and preparing for the 2025 budget. The grants all went out middle of April, and we've been busily processing paperwork on executing contracts and getting funds moving for those awards. And the draft budget committee, I should say the budget committee met last Friday. And we have a draft that's being reviewed right now and should be ready to go to the full STPB in May. So you should see that a bit later this summer. One other update is the visitor profile study is in progress, collecting results. We've got that open on March 18th. We've been getting results through our online portal for that, and hope to have an update later this summer with some preliminary data that we can share with the group. Otherwise, the rest of the report, you have a whole big list of events. I'd encourage you to mark your calendars for anything that looks fun or in your communities for the remainder of the year. And then the room tax report, so you can see how 2024 is stacking up to last year. That's all I had. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Nick? All right, appreciate it, Nick. Thanks for the update. And I do really appreciate the event calendar. It's hard to pull all those together, so this is a nice concentrated place. And so hopefully others find it useful as well. Thanks. All right, as I mentioned, the next item on our agenda is the Visit Ithaca annual report, which will be postponed till our June meeting. But if I could ask Jennifer Tavares from the Tompkins County Chamber of Commerce to come up and share some insights on wayfinding.
I have a pen there somewhere. Hi, everyone. Hi. Thanks for your flexibility on the report.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Oh, you got to make sure you use your mic too.
I've got a couple of things to set up here, so I just need 1 second. I have to share my screen.
While you're setting up, I just wanted to say, sorry I missed the Borg Warner tour last week. I think it was last week, yeah.
Thank you for
Sorry about
that. Yeah, I'm happy to provide an update if anyone wants to hear a little bit more about that. Let's see. Looks like I'm managing this so far. Hang on, that's not what we want. 1 more second here. Sharing, getting things to be full screen from PDF, a little different than PowerPoint. Great, okay. Yes, we ended up losing all of you for that tour, but Katie Borgella was able to join us, and I think there will be more opportunities, but it was a really great chance to get a number of local leaders and organizational partners from economic and workforce development organizations and elected officials or county employees up to the plant. The vast majority of the people that were there had never been there before, so it was a good learning opportunity. And there are a lot of exciting opportunities happening at Borg Warner. There's a lot of misinformation out on the street, so part of the goal was to share accurate information about what's going on related to hiring, workforce, new products coming online, the plant consolidation effort, et cetera. So we're looking forward to continue playing a part in helping get the word out and get folks up there and being able to understand what they do there, and you know, as a community continuing to support. It's our largest private employer, our largest manufacturer. They add a lot of value and impact our economy in a really important way, so I'm hoping that that will all continue. We'll get you next time.
Thank you. Thanks for that update.
Absolutely. Update on the wayfinding initiative. Thank you all for the time here. This is, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm just going to do a brief bit of background. The Chamber and partners were funded through the tourism program back in 2013, which is, you know, lifetimes ago at this point, to do a wayfinding signage plan. So that was a consultant that we worked with to arrive at a county-wide comprehensive wayfinding signage plan, had components for gateway signs at the county boundaries, gateway signs for individual municipalities, intermunicipal wayfinding signage, so the directional signs that help you navigate the community. It had a replacement and additional signage plan related to regular DOT signs, so those signs that you see as you drive around that maybe are green or may point to specific waypoints or different geographies as you drive around, those standard DOT signs, those were taken into consideration with the plan as well. There were also some sub-aspects of the plan to give attention to pedestrian wayfinding signage needs, so thinking about our areas that are most traveled by pedestrians that are both visitors, new residents to the area, students, parents, and visitors, downtown, the Commons, that circulating area around that part of the community, College Town to a much lesser degree, but certainly a need in College Town as well. Helping people find parking, helping people find those things that they are most likely looking for when they come to our community, either as a newcomer or as a visitor. All were sort of goals around the project. The other piece of this that's, I think, important to understand as I review this is placemaking. It's a word I think a lot more people are familiar with now, but I think 10 years ago, and at a few times in the past, placemaking was not necessarily a concept as many people were familiar with. Helping create a sense of place, a sense of identity, a community sort of brand, if you will, helping in a cohesive way, welcoming people into our community, helping it feel well cared for. And there's a lot of other ways that we do that in this community. There's public art, there's flower plantings, there are a lot of things that typically are funded through the tourism program, but that also benefit residents of the community, and again, make us an attractive place to live and work and do business. This is another component of those types of investments in our community. So just a little background there for anyone who wasn't familiar. So bringing us up to, last year, we've at different points over a decade tried to push this project forward, try to pull together the funding that it might need, make proposals to various entities. There have been times where a significant amount of the funding that was needed was on the table, but not quite enough to get us there. I'd say in the 2016 timeframe, it looked most promising. And then fast forward a couple years, the pandemic really forced us to completely set this aside for a while. Many of you likely recall that the tourism program had funding set aside to support the wayfinding project, but it was nowhere near enough to actually install the project. The other thing I'll just say is that the prior plan was, as scoped, very comprehensive, rather expensive, had a really big budget, and I never approached trying to actually get this done from the perspective that we would actually come up with all the money. We knew from the start we were likely going to need to sort of value engineer, take some signs out, figure out how to build the components of the plan that could be funded, and maybe even phase the project. So we were always working with sort of some of those assumptions. Last year, thanks to an investment from the IDA through their fund balance, the Chamber Foundation was able to pull together a group of people, begin to take the lead on doing a reanalysis of this plan and trying to rescope the total size of the plan, come up with something that would be feasible to install, a budget that could work, et cetera. So everything you see here on this list, you can tell sort of where we're at in that process of rescoping, revising the budget, redesigning. That's an important piece. I don't have pictures of the old plan here today. I'm sure many of you have seen them along the way, and I'm happy to share them if anyone needs them. But people were not in love with the design. It had some things that we felt would make it more expensive, swoops, logos, those kinds of things. So we really looked at this as an effort to simplify what this might look like and help it blend a bit throughout our communities and with all the other signage that we have, and to reduce the cost of the project. So we're actually, right now, I'd say we are still in the construction details and phasing plan area. So one more little arrow down could be on this list here. There's an advisory group. Again, it has a diverse group of our stakeholders at the table helping support this work, from the county, the city, the tourism program, some different strategic partners, Downtown Ithaca Alliance, et cetera, participating in this as we go through it. They've been involved in numerous design rounds with the firm that was subcontracted to revise the signage design. One thing we've spent a lot of time on is the actual tourism assets, or the landmarks, if you will, that are being signed to, and that does include municipalities in different areas of the county, throughout the county, trying to make sure we maintain a cohesive program that still can meet that sort of gateway, welcoming need, and also navigating into the core areas of all the communities, while also eliminating things that might not be necessary. We also have had some changes in the 10 years. There's new things that need signage. The conference center is a really good example. That was not in the prior plan. It needed to be added to this plan, and some thought around how to make sure that we can help folks find that. Downtown parking, parking in general has always been an issue, but paying attention to how we incorporate parking, et cetera, as we go through. So here I'm just going to jump straight to sort of where we're at in terms of the current design of the plan. This is the redesigned signage. I will just caution you that sometimes the colors on various screens do not look like they will actually look. These look on those large screens a little bit bright. They're a bit brighter than on my screen. What you see here is the Ithaca is Gorgeous green, so the standard green that's used as our main sort of tourism marketing green is here. There's a much darker green, and then there's what IdeaCraft, which is the subcontractor, did was incorporate some waves in the design here and there that are reminiscent of both some of our topography and our rock formations here, and also water, and water is something we of course identify with a lot as a community. So they tried to find a way to incorporate some unique design that would actually associate with the community that we all live in. What you see here is an assortment of the different sign types. You see county gateway signage that welcomes people when they get to the county lines and also thanks them for being here when they're leaving. Gateway signs for different municipalities in the county. You see examples of what a pedestrian sort of, it's not really a kiosk, but for lack of a better word, a pedestrian sign that you could walk up to and find your way to the main downtown and within a block or two of the commons. Assets, there's a map, and there's also going to be, this was an idea that came out of the advisory group, there's going to be, DOT has all kinds of standards about these things that can help guide the final product. I will just tell you there's some review going on right now about the final size that the signs can be. Most of the plan was based on the prior plan, and there were already lots of conversations with DOT about signage and scope of the project and making sure everything was DOT compliant. There is going to be another check between the main consultants, which I didn't mention, but that's Witham Planning and Design. I'm sure you're all quite familiar with Witham at this point, involved in many projects in the community. They are reviewing the size and the scale of the different signs, and that will influence in the end how many different waypoints can go on each sign, or which size sign we need to use in different places in terms of, you know, some places only need 2 waypoints, for example, or maybe they could have 3, and which sign that requires based on the miles per hour might dictate the ultimate plan. Just a couple other examples here. I won't belabor those points. This really walks through, you know, how it might look or feel and sort of the measurements of these different sign types. I just wanted to sort of share a little bit more about where we're at right now and where we're going. The full content review, and you know, it's actually a really tremendous amount of work to go through all of the signs in the whole county, first of all, which they did. They did a complete signage inventory of the entire county, if that's helpful to anyone else for any other purposes. Because New York State DOT could not even report to us that they had been monitoring and maintaining and keeping track of their own signs. So they didn't have anything they could have shared with us that would help make our job easier. So the consultants had to do a full inventory. And every single waypoint on every sign at every intersection in the final plan needs to be evaluated for accuracy. Does this have the priority waypoints on it? Is there anything else that needs to be done to this sign before we're going to be ready to fully go to permitting phase? While that work is happening, we also have, and while all of this work has been happening, we've been having conversations with potential funders. We've been having conversations with some stakeholders. I will say not all yet, so we're working on engaging some additional stakeholders that need to be revisited or chatted with before we get to final on this project. We certainly, I just want to reference, because I didn't mean to breeze over it, but the county tourism program provided an additional commitment to this project. Many of you remember that, it was several months ago. Additional commitment that really helped us find a pathway to to the finish line on this. Without that, I don't think there'd be any way to get there. And I will just say, we also had one potential RFP respondent give us their back of the envelope, here's what we think this might cost to actually fabricate and install a few months ago. And while his numbers did not include prevailing wages or, all of the requirements that the project will be under, it was the first time that I saw a number related to installing this plan that looked remotely feasible. There's still some fundraising that likely is needed. We are working with some potential opportunity for state funding. There's some other partners who had committed funding previously that I've been having conversations with about coming back to the table on this, but I am hopeful that we will have a plan that can be bid out, that we can get quotes from various fabricators. We still have some conversations with some local partners about potential support with installation that might help with that final project budget. Once we have those quotes in, we will be able to sort of figure out, okay, are we dealing with a gap still, or do we need to phase? Do we phase over 2 years? How do we actually get to the finish line on this? But we are getting close, and it's the first time that I've ever felt that way. The last thing I just wanted to say is we did an effort to look into, could we incorporate, I'm sorry this is a little bit small, I don't know if I can make this bigger for you, but we were trying to see if we could incorporate some more iconography into the plan. Some of the pedestrian signage will have some icons on it. It was highly discouraged by the DOT that we start adding more iconography on all of the vehicular signs because it distracts people. We were thinking it's a very international community, some more icons might be helpful, especially if someone's not necessarily an English first speaker. It might help them with understanding the signs a little bit better. They very much felt that adding icons to vehicular signs confuses matters, and it could make things, it would not help, and they weren't so inclined to issue permits for signs that that had those characteristics. So there's going to be some work with both the city for in-city signs or on city road signs and the DOT. We likely are going to need to interface with the county as well on that. And this is just a quick example of some of the icons that IdeaCraft had pulled together to go into the plan here. So I'd rather just stop talking and see if anyone has any questions, because I think I've done a pretty comprehensive overview of where we are.
I see Mike, and then Ann.
You said you had a dollar amount that was somewhat feasible. Can you share what the dollar amount was?
Oh, if my memory serves me, it was in the $600,000 to $700,000 range. However, again, that did not include prevailing wages, so you could probably add 30% to the wage costs on that project. I think it'll end up closer to $1 million. I do want to reference also that the original budget in 2013 dollars was $1.2 something million to do this project. So we're fast forward 10 years, that amount of inflation, rising costs, labor costs, supply chain costs, and still looking at a budget that might come in below that original budget, which I think is a pretty significant accomplishment, actually. Any other questions?
No, that's my
okay.
Ann?
A couple questions. First off, can you remind us, I think you said this before, how you're getting the funding for this?
The majority of the funding is from the tourism program. The city of Ithaca also has funding committed to the project. We previously had an assortment of some private funders, so I don't want to name any names here, but some local foundation private funders. We had some institutional partners, some private business partners who were also funding before. There were some other municipalities who also had committed funding in the past and may be willing to do so in the future. Before sort of shopping around and asking for the rest of the dollars to come back, I've been trying to isolate, and figure out exactly what is our gap and what do we need to raise to get to the finish line. And again, all of those numbers are a little bit fungible if we are able to leverage some partner installation support, for example. So even when we thought we were trying to pull this together before, we had at least verbal agreement / understanding that both the county and the city were going to support installation. That's how we were able to get to something that might be framed out and work properly years ago. Those conversations are different now, and I know everyone's capacities are different now, but I'm still hopeful that we might be able to see some kind of support there that would help get the signs in the ground without us having to pay, outsource all that labor on a contract basis, because frankly, labor is just a shortage everywhere. So, yeah.
Thank you. And wondering, so you said the symbols are not allowed on any of the vehicular signs for roads, or is it just state roads?
So what we've talked about is, I want to see if I can find an example here. This sign that says parking on the bottom, we are calling out parking differently. So there's certain assets where they might not have a sign just for that trail or that asset, for example, because people have ways of finding, how can I find the Finger Lakes Trail or the Recway Trail or whatever, the Dryden Rail Trail. It's actually the parking, if someone's in a vehicle, it's actually the parking for those trailheads that they need to be signed to. So we're trying to put some thought around making sure that the parking for some of these things is really clear and called out on the sign. We talked about maybe asking to include the parking symbol at least on some of those signs. Things like, on this example, you might see there's parks here. Well, there could be a symbol for parks, but we have a lot of parks and trails. Do we want to stick logos on all the signs or icons on all the signs? Something like the, Treeman Marina or something, you could put a boat on there. It's actually hard to come up with an icon that is really universally accepted and will be clear and obvious to everyone that that's what that is, right? So better to just probably say marina or boat launch if that's what we're trying to get across to people. But yeah, so they were pretty a hard no on the icons out and about in the vehicular areas, but I think in the pedestrian areas we'll be able to incorporate some.
For the pedestrian areas, okay, thank you. And then. And maybe you said this before, but was the Finger Lakes Independence Center or some other equivalent agency helping to help with aspects of accessibility?
I don't know that they've been involved as an agency. I can tell you that there's been discussion around the contrast of the letters and the signs, making sure that for color blindness or for any sight difficulties that we're using as much contrast as possible. The DOT also has standards in place related to accessibility on the signs, and so in terms of making sure that everything is compliant from that perspective, thought has been put into that and making sure that that the design incorporates all of those guidelines. But that's a good question, and certainly happy and open to have someone from Flick give it a glance too.
Okay, yeah, just thinking before we get to that stage and then we find out. It's hard for,
well,
I mean, I know.
Particularly for the pedestrian signage, actually, I think if we think about the pedestrian signs in the commons, and people need to be able to see those from different heights or access them from different heights. So I think that would be a good place to also seek some input.
Thank you very much.
I have one if nobody else has any. I just, in looking at the icon page, I think it's in our packet page 32, with restrooms, and again, I'm by no means an expert in this field, but I think a toilet is more of a universal symbol and doesn't have any gender connotations or anything like that. But that was just the only thing that stood out to me. Otherwise, I really love the design. It's great work. I know it's a long time coming, so looking forward to seeing this come to fruition. If there's no other questions or comments from members of the committee, we do have a full agenda, so we'll need to keep rolling.
Sure.
But as always, appreciate it, and thank you. Great work here. Thanks for the update.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Don't worry, I'll be back next month with a couple other topics. So
sounds good. We'll see you then.
Good to see you all.
Thanks. All right, next up on our agenda is the Ithaca Board of Realtors with a market recap. This is ID 12399, and we have with us Paul Rossi, a friend of the legislature for sure, with the New York State Association of Realtors, and then Sarah Wisendorf, who's the executive officer for the Ithaca Board of Realtors, and Brent Katzman with the Ithaca Board of Realtors, who chairs the Government Relations?
Government Affairs, close.
Government Affairs Committee. So thank you all for joining us, and I know many members of the legislature were able to participate last month in your legislative luncheon, which was great. So we got a little bit of a preview to this conversation. So if we can, we'll take about 15, 20 minutes or so for the presentation and some conversation, and go from there. So Brent, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you all for inviting us once again. We always enjoy coming here and having conversations about the world of housing and our take on the current market conditions. So without further ado, I will jump into our slides here. And let me see if I can improve the. Did not work. Right? Yes, it did. All right. A little delay. So thanks again. Those of you who did attend our legislative luncheon on April 12th have seen some of these slides. There have been some updates, though, a little bit more current data, including our preliminary look at the recent state budget initiatives that seem to have brought housing front and center in terms of the negotiations in Albany. But when we met a year ago, we talked about the following market concerns as it relates to housing, particularly middle market and affordable owner-occupied housing. The concerns at the time, zoning restrictions that impacted the creation of single-family and infill housing, current housing creation focused on the well-resourced, seem to be focused on well-resourced or low-income and not really what we have been calling sort of the missing middle or the workforce housing. Growing concern about homelessness, New York State barriers to condo development, the fact that NIMBYism seemed to be continuing to often impact the decisions made in municipalities about what housing would be allowed, shortage of options for seniors, and
Brent?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm one who always says, can you explain? I mean, I think most people know what NIMBYism, but if you could say whenever you have an acronym what it means.
Sure, I'm sorry. Not in my backyard. So, local citizens who are concerned about changes to the character of their neighborhoods as a result of added development. Repurposing of existing building stock for housing, there were conversations about the opportunities there. Lack of resale inventory, the expanding FEMA zones that cause rising insurance costs and therefore costs of home ownership. The difficulty in creating new house development because of the cost of construction. The need for expanded municipal infrastructure in order to make more of our vacant land serviceable for creation of housing. Some concerns that the County 239 review process was too late to really have a more meaningful impact on the decisions at the municipal level, and transportation limitations that disproportionately affected low and moderate income. Since that meeting a year ago, there has been some signs of movement in our marketplace. Library Place did open, welcoming some senior residents, which should, by most accounts, free up some of those homes now back into the marketplace. The City of Ithaca did renegotiate the Cornell contribution agreements to increase their participation in our funding of municipal budgets. The New York City +1 pilot program to develop ADUs that.
Brent, I'm sorry,
yeah.
but we just try and be real transparent. So when you get to like ADUs or STRs,
all right.
If you don't mind, thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Accessory dwelling units, so the opportunity for a property owner of a single family home to build a small footprint additional dwelling unit on their property, either in the form of a carriage house or an attached small dwelling unit. And this is a program that we've actually been very interested in seeing more of. This was a pilot program funded by the state. INHS was awarded the opportunity to try to see what they could do with this initial funding. There have been some difficulties in making real progress because the requirements for how the state defines an accessory dwelling unit and perhaps how the local municipality does, but mostly it had really to do with figuring out the cost and how much the program would really afford. But they're still working on it, hoping to get a few of those built here in the coming months. The City of Ithaca short-term rental regulations, those are nearing a vote. There's more opportunity for public comment. Those aim to return single-family properties back to the market, to long-term rentals, more to owner-occupied housing. The Community Housing Development Fund continues to award grants to income-qualified projects. And Ithaca Neighborhood Housing Services, obviously in the last couple of years, has really broadened their offerings and their efforts all across our county, including Compass, which is the manufactured housing development, the first of its kind that they've invested in, Village Grove and others. Also, I think good news is that the Pro-Housing Community Initiative of New York State has managed to get Groton to sign on, and the City of Ithaca and Town of Dryden have both submitted letters of intent to participate. These are additional fundings available to communities to help support housing growth by the communities taking a pledge to develop housing, particularly for the workforce and affordable marketplace. The City of Ithaca is now focused on redevelopment of the downtown corridor from the Commons to the West End. And in their plans, their proposals include some incentives for both market rate and, again, affordable or supportive housing development. But really sort of while there has been progress, we all know the severity of the housing shortage here and the concerns we all have about continuing to make advancement in making homes available for the people who live and work here. And yet the more they change, the more they stay the same. The statistics for this past year essentially build on the trend we talked about last year. New residential listings, meaning the properties that come onto the market that somebody can purchase, continue to decline year after year. 2023, we were down to 841 properties that were made available to purchase in Tompkins County, down from 1273 prior to the pandemic. So over 400 fewer homes, about a 34% drop since the beginning of the pandemic. Obviously that contributes to some other implications. This year is off to a sort of a disconcerting start. Already in 2024, the number of new listings that have come on are down 14% from last year's historic low. So we aren't seeing much of a turnaround yet in existing housing stock returning to market. Because there's so few and we're an attractive place and there's still lots of buyers in the marketplace, the opportunity to buy those homes is brief. You have to participate quickly. Within 23 days, on average, the homes are now going under contract and moving towards closing. This lack of inventory and competition for the limited inventory has led to increasing average sale prices of 31% since the start of the pandemic. We have experienced some flattening, as you can see in the chart, in 2023, but this year is already, again, because of the decline, started off with some steep competition and rising values or sale prices. Tompkins County is not unique in this regard. Our neighboring counties have experienced the same decline in residential properties available to purchase. We would argue that part of that is because we have got people who want to live in Tompkins County who have not been able to find anything, so they search a little further afield where they can find something they may be able to afford. That has therefore resulted in price increases in our surrounding marketplaces and counties as well. These stats are a combination of Cayuga, Chemung, Cortland, Sigler, Seneca, and Tioga counties, or the contiguous counties around us that make up part of our service area. And again, it's also true statewide. Statewide, available housing, The yearly comparison of closed sales down 14%, pending sales down 2%, new listings down 7.5%, and sale prices climbing. So what does that mean to affordability? Well, obviously it's plummeted. Households earning area median incomes, which in this marketplace are better than much of the state, cannot afford an area median home value here. And if you look at inflation-adjusted median household income in Tompkins County has largely been flat since 2019. It's estimated when the numbers finally come in, this is sourced from the American Community Survey, that the estimated median household income will rise to just under $70,000, but only 0.75% from the year prior. If you look specifically at one definition of workforce housing, which are houses that people at 60 to 120% of area median income could reasonably expect to afford, that puts us in a price range of 130 to 350 in our market area. Those sales from 2021 to 2024 have declined 40%. And it's again, largely because of escalation of value overall. Prices that were once $200,000 are now $250,000 or $300,000, and it just continues to go up the ladder, if you will. So you'll see declines in inventory year over year in the lower priced ranges here, while you're seeing flattening or increased activity in the higher price ranges. Interesting statistic about our market area, which is different really than our surrounding communities, is that the buyers here, over a third of them pay cash. And that was true last year as well. We're seeing the similar pattern this year. Very few residents here use government-backed mortgages, FHA, Fannie, FHA, VA, USDA mortgages, not because they aren't available here, but just because the value of the properties and the nature of the buyers who can afford to purchase aren't relying on those programs. So prices are one part of the affordability puzzle. Obviously, there are others. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we did talk about this at the legislative luncheon. I know it's very actively being talked about in our community. The preliminary assessment that Tompkins County Assessment Office put out of 19.8% on average, obviously varies across municipalities, but a significant annual jump in assessed value. Of those parcels that were reassessed this year, 23,000 of them experienced an increase in assessed value. Of those, 3/4 saw an increase of 10% or more. So those that saw an increase, which was most of the parcels, 3/4 of them saw an increase of over 10%. So what happened to the 2% tax cap? Well, this is actually a quote from Jay Franklin's memo to the county legislature at the beginning of this year about the historical increases in taxes. It turns out that since that tax cap was put in effect, we've actually had a slightly higher average tax levy growth. It's not unique to any municipality, and it's not unique to any village, and it's not unique to any school district. The aggregate change over the past 3 years for municipalities, towns and cities has been 13.5%, for villages 7.75%, for the county in aggregate 2.5%. And you can see here the school district tax levies vary quite a lot, but still on average over a course of 3 years, 9.4%. These increases in levies, which is the real absolute cost to the property owner for taxes, are being borne by essentially the same number of parcels every year. Only 2 additional tax parcels have been added to the taxable roll in the past 3 years. So any increase is automatically borne by the existing tax-paying parcels. And those valuations are outpacing sales price increases. So the assessed value is growing faster than the actual property value as you look at sale prices. Lots of municipalities and area school districts are increasing their budgetary requirements faster than the values are increasing. This we already know what the Ithaca City School District has proposed. All I will say to this is that it seems that this significant assessed value increase sort of woke up the community. And there have been a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations, a lot of people showing up now for school board meetings. At the last school board meeting, as you all know, they made an adjustment, and they agreed to not pursue their interest in doing a continued tax rate, but rather to go ahead and adjust to their budgetary demand, which we applaud the movement in that direction. Just to give you a sense of what even that adjustment might look like for the average property owner, if you really look at finally at the bottom line in bold, their now new proposed tax rate of 15.68 is a tax bill on average of $5,315, an increase of $681 over 2023, or 14.7%. So it's a movement in the right direction in terms of reducing their demands, but it certainly is still well ahead of what incomes are doing and what values are doing. And just to set the record straight, this isn't going to change anytime soon if we don't begin to address some of these concerns. We are now in the center of a New York State tech hub that is bounded by Binghamton, Syracuse, and Rochester. That designation is part of what's bringing in people like Micron to Clay and other communities who are looking to make a move here. Interestingly enough, in talking to Andrew Fish, Center State CEO out of Syracuse, who helps advise industry on opportunities here in central New York, he is projecting $8.84 billion in new investment in our economic development pipeline as of March 2024. So that's this money down the road coming our way in terms of investment in economic development, and with that, therefore, housing demand. So very quickly, understand the affordability problem. You know, we see it as having three elements. One is the supply, two is in-migration, which is fueling competition for existing housing, and three, economic disparity. Many buyers with ample cash and frustrated buyers choosing to rent, which is displacing, again, our local workforce. So in search of solutions, short term, there's some things happening. We all know about them, the short-term rental restrictions in the city. We are supportive of a housing access voucher program that's currently in committee at the state. We are interested in having conversations about holding to property tax caps and we definitely support the first-time homebuyer savings program that is being discussed in Albany. Long-term, though, increased adoption of pro-housing communities, zoning changes to allow for increased density, infrastructure investment and/or developer incentives, particularly for middle market and owner-occupied housing, and we need to have conversations about what do we do about this trajectory on property tax. We were pleased, though, to see the many measures coming out of the New York State 2024 budget negotiations in Albany. They did create a statewide tax incentive for multifamily housing. They set aside another $650 million in discretionary funds for municipalities designated as pro-housing communities, so that money is available, and we encourage other of our local communities to apply. Providing incentives for communities to allow accessory dwelling units, $500 million towards the development of up to 15,000 housing units on state-owned land, some measures to protect homeowners from deed theft, and some fairly significant changes into the proposed good cause eviction, which was a sticking point in Albany last year and ultimately was tabled. It now will move forward in a different version than some folks have been advocating for, but it certainly does provide some added tenant protections, but also takes away some of the concerns that we certainly had as an industry about its limitations and impact on small landlords. It does provide exemptions so that new construction isn't disincentivized as a result of it. And it does exempt small portfolio owners of 10 units or less and owner-occupied buildings. And it caps the annual rent increases now at 5% plus CPI. Before it was CPI or 3%, whichever is greater. There are other things that we could be talking about how to address this, exploring tax credits to preserve ownership. Again, that has a lot to do with the conversations about property taxes, promoting affordable zoning via zoning reform, housing via zoning reform, including ADUs. There are other municipalities around us and states that are really making big moves in zoning to allow for greater density. And then the unknown, the impact of New York's decision to go fully electric over the coming years. There are a lot of other states that are watching the impact that might have on affordability. Just real quick, for those of you who are at the legislative lunch, and these two slides weren't in the deck that was sent out in advance, but you may recall that we asked the group to talk about 3 different priorities and what they thought might be of greater value to begin to address this issue. These were the questions. I won't read them verbatim, but basically, what kind of steps should we take to encourage housing production? What do you think a rethinking of zoning density should look like, and who should be involved? And how would you approach the challenge of property tax reforms? And then rank those in terms of importance. And I thought this was interesting. The group that met with us on April 12th collectively seemed to believe that prioritization of incentivizing developers and or making municipal investment in infrastructure is the first priority to address housing shortages. Make it easier to build. It seems like that is a more achievable and clearer set of objectives. Zoning changes seemed like an easier path in the short to midterm than tax reform, but both seem to be equally weighted in importance because the issue on property taxes is so present right now. But clearly, all of these play a role in housing availability and affordability. But we really love to participate in making things move forward on those fronts. So those are my slides. I'm happy to open up for questions.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Brent. Any questions by members of the committee on any information provided? Ann?
No.
Oh, sorry. Mike?
You had mentioned zoning to increase density. What do you mean by density? Just density within the city, or do you mean density within the suburbs?
Oh, I think that it's a good question. Density, obviously, meaning the number of dwelling units per unit of land, right? Acre or building lots or what have you. Yes, I think the city has certainly some opportunity to do that, particularly on the accessory dwelling unit front, because they are small lots to begin with. But the town of Ithaca, certainly, which tends to have larger parcels and has historically been very restrictive on second dwelling units, and are very specific on where they'll allow it and how they'll allow it to happen. It just seems that there is municipal infrastructure in place in the town, and there is vacant land in town that's connected to that. That moving away from the low density, medium density model of planning to allow folks to create both additional income on their property, but also to create more homes seems prudent in our regard.
I'm going to tack onto that as well. Density can also mean rethinking to the usefulness, like with a lower density or medium density. So say you have R1, a residentially zoned neighborhood. Historically, you might not have allowed for a triplex or a fourplex in there. You could change zoning to allow for easier development of multifamily units within what would be termed a traditionally single-family area. So just thinking about where the infrastructure connections are and being open to thinking about different utilizations of what historically would have been the 1950s, single family, big yards, big garages, those kind of things, so.
But isn't that kind of what people are looking for? I mean, I understand that we always want to pack as many people into a place as possible, but it just seems to me that when people are moving here, they're looking for single-family homes, maybe not with 3 acres, but certainly with a yard. And that seems to be what's kind of missing from the market. I mean, that's what's driving the single-family home assessments through the roof, is, I guess, my question.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mike. I would argue that the drive towards allowing multiple dwelling units on a single parcel is more about addressing creating opportunities for people who otherwise can't afford to be in the town because they can generate income on their property, right? So that's the large part of that. Yes, certainly there have been, particularly the bi-coastal migrants who have been coming into our marketplace who love our climate and our culture and that sort of thing. They have certainly been looking not just in the city but broader out, and many of them probably do like larger parcels. But I wouldn't say that it's an either or, right? There's clearly so much demand, and still we are land rich and housing poor, right? And I don't think those are incompatible to find a way to do both cluster development for those who don't want big yards to maintain and that sort of thing, particularly seniors and that sort of audience, but to also allow for those who want to have a larger parcel to have it. But we just help figure out where that should be and provide them access to services.
Ann and then Veronica.
Yeah, I'll try and be brief. I know we're pressed for time. Just speaking from as chair of the Community Housing Development Fund, and I know other folks here are on it, Greg and Travis, we're always looking for more money. We're having a larger influx through the IDA, and still the money's going out as fast as we can get it in. So, but we're continue to work through that program. So thanks for mentioning that. And I know, or you might know, Trumansburg recently passed some ordinances so that they can have more ADUs and more infill in their downtown. And you don't have to answer this now, but because I know we're pressed for time, but just a question in my head, I was thinking about why are people holding on to their houses longer? I'm thinking that's maybe part of the situation. If people aren't, I know the prices are going up, they're going faster, but it seems like maybe people are holding on to them longer, but we don't have to discuss that today, but just maybe for another time or off the record.
No, just very quickly to address that, yes, they are, right? And our take on reading the tea leaves is a couple of things. One is that to sell, you also have to be able to buy. And if you want to stay in town, even if you're looking for something smaller, you may be paying as much or more than it costs you to live where you are, right? You have a 2 or 3% mortgage, buy a 6% mortgage on a smaller place and pay a higher price. So there's a sort of an economic disadvantage to moving. And I think our take is that there's fewer people trying to escape, all right, in Tompkins County and head south, right, than there used to be. That we are becoming a really attractive place for people to stay and age in place. And so, once there's more opportunity, I think, and therefore potentially a softening or a correction to housing values, that will begin to open up. And obviously, we're also hoping for some interest rate changes to begin to open things up.
Thank you.
Veronica, last question.
Yeah. Oh, I have to pick only one?
No, you're the last one. You're the last one to go.
Okay. I wanted to say to Mike's point, the multi-acre single-family home is attractive, but I also want to live in the city where that's not really an option. And it's not just because I want to keep this job, but like I like being able to walk around to places, and so do plenty of other people who just like it or can't afford a car, don't want to drive or can't drive for like a myriad of medical reasons. And you kind of need density to accommodate that because people can only walk so far and still maintain a normal life. I wanted to say I appreciate the listed of like, I missed the brunch, but those three legislative need the three need categories that you brought up of adding municipal infrastructure, which I think is important, and zoning changes and property tax reform. And I know we can't do it here, but I've always thought it is a bummer at best that we, the county, can only, well, we collect sales tax, but we can only levy property taxes and not income taxes. And it would be great if, especially because you're showing how like a median income can't even buy a medium house, it would be great if we could move the tax burden to higher income earners, either by being able to levy a county income tax. I know that's not gonna happen maybe ever, or by the state taking back more of its financial responsibilities because the state can levy income tax. That's just a little rant I wanted to put into the world. The last thing, and this is kind of a question for our planning commissioner, Katie Borgella, maybe, about the zoning changes. We all know the county itself doesn't do zoning, but I was chatting with someone recently who was talking about, at least in the city and maybe other places, the troubles of small lot sizes and how if you like really start to get down to plan, how am I gonna build a house with all these regulations, it maybe doesn't work, but pointed out that a lot of us lawmakers have never actually done that exercise. Like I certainly haven't. I've looked at the zoning code and I've gone, I don't know how to read this, and carried on. And I'm wondering if there's like educational elements, and this is probably not to be answered right now, that maybe like our county planning department or someone else can help with to like spur our zoning regulation decision makers to realize the urgency of this problem. I guess that wasn't a question, but there.
Would you like me? I can respond if you want me to. So we've done some things like that in the past. We've had like specialized consultants come in talking about the missing middle and worked. I remember having multiple meetings out in the village of Trumansburg to look at their zoning and what it would look like with the design coming in. It's hard because when it's kind of not driven by the municipality and it's kind of this conceptual idea, it makes it hard for change to happen. But they did actually, Trumansburg did make some changes based on that work. But I would say that one initiative that we have in our work program this year, we're calling the Housing Support for Municipal Planners. And we're offering county staff support to research various topics and come up with templates and case law and whatever the municipal planners might want us to focus on to support them, to help them make zoning changes and land use changes in their municipality. We're kicking off that work actually on Monday. I believe we have 8 municipalities joining in that conversation, trying to just work together as professional planners to identify what the kind of ripest opportunities are in the county to drive that incremental change, that there is no silver bullet on this. And so if we can figure out some areas of mutual interest, we can support each other in this work and try to move some things forward.
Thank you.
All right, well, we are at our time. As always, I appreciate it. As you all know, I'm a big fan of realtors because I married one. So appreciate all the work that you all do, and appreciate some of the market insights. And, you know, this is a conversation that has many perspectives. So as we can view it from as many angles as possible, we appreciate that, and hopefully we can make some incremental progress over time. So again, thanks for taking time out of your busy days, and enjoy the mac and cheese bowl tonight. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you so much.
And thanks for convening that meeting with local elected officials and the real estate, or the Ithaca Board of Realtors, and our lunch. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. We will continue to do that. Thanks very much.
And I'm also a former real estate agent.
Yeah.
And inspector.
And inspector.
All right, next up, we have an exciting conversation on the Tompkins County living wage. It's ID 12327. We have Pete Myers, Ian Greer. Please make your way wherever you'd like. Any spots open. If you have other colleagues with you as well, welcome to join the conversation. I'll turn it over to you. We've got about 20-ish minutes for presentation, a little bit for conversation. We do have one other agenda item that we need to conclude before 5 o'clock. So just to sort of set some parameters, but I'll turn it over to you for introductions and let you take it away with your presentation.
Great. I'm Pete Myers. I'm the one of the founders of the Tompkins County then Living Wage Coalition back in early 2003. We changed our name to the Tompkins County Worker Center in 2006. So the fact that we were the Living Wage Coalition indicates that wage issues have been important to us from jump. The Worker Center, though, however, is a kind of both inside-outside organization in the sense that we both advocate for workers in their workplaces. We've had like $1.5 million in wage theft violations that we've successfully got judgments on, to take but one example. We encourage workers to organize in the workplace when they feel like things are unfair. They're experiencing an unfair workplace. So it's, you know, they're experienced inside and outside of work. So we started actually in 2006, the nation's first living wage employer certification program, which is taking off nationally now, including a national organization that's certifying employers everywhere in every part of the country. We've worked on a variety of statewide minimum wage increases. Actually, we were here last year in March to get a resolution passed, the only county in the state that endorsed a $21.25 statewide minimum wage. Of course, that didn't pass. It's going up to $17 at this point. It's right now $15 in Tompkins County. So we obviously feel like the minimum wage has never been enough. It's not a living wage. Back in 2017, we started a living wage working group where I was the organizer of that group. Anna Kellis was the chair of the group, ex-county legislator, as well as Sally Klingel, who was then the facilitator from the Scheiman Institute at Cornell University's ILR School, the director of the Labor Management Relations Program. So with that in mind, we had a number of members of the working group, including Jennifer Taveras, who's here today, many employers, including Dan Brown of the Racker Center, the HR director for the Green Star Food Co-op, and some other smaller businesses, Kathy Schlaughter, the longtime ED of the Human Services Coalition, Leslie McBean Claiborne, who was then part of the county legislature, Savante Myrick, Gary Ferguson of the Downtown Partnership, Lisa Holmes, then with the Office for the Aging, Cynthia Brock of City Council, and Ian Greer of the ILR School. So I'm just setting this up to say our long-term goal here is to eventually get legislation passed in Tompkins County that would make the minimum wage a living wage. That's our ultimate aim here, but we're just setting things up with this initial presentation of a study by Ian.
Yeah, so thanks, Pete. Here, let me share my screen.
And while you're pulling that up, I do want to put out there, because Pete, I think you mentioned this, you know, this is an initial conversation for us in this committee to learn more. You know, we don't see there's no action being taken today. This is information, learning. There'll be a lot more conversation if it's the sense of the committee to take up this initiative. But I just want to make sure that those watching, that we're just fully transparent. And this is the first step of this committee to have the conversation around potentially what could come next.
That is entirely correct.
Great, thank you.
Correct.
Okay, so yeah, I'm here to present research. I was asked in 2018 by Pete and Anna to start following the data on wages and the low-wage workforce in Tompkins County. The research evolved into a big, complex collaboration involving quite a few researchers. These included Cheyenne Osterreich, the economist from Ithaca College, who helped lead the research from the beginning. It included Rusty Weaver from the ILR School's Buffalo office, who has done quite a lot of the data work for calculating a living wage and for looking at the demographics of the sub-living wage workforce. It includes Maru Rodriguez, who did some very sophisticated work modeling benefits cliffs. It included Sally Klingel, who facilitated the working group. It includes Sean O'Brady from McMaster University, Matt Vidal from Loughborough University, and Reed Eaglesham, one of our PhD students who've worked on the employer study. And it has included a number of student assistants as well. I'm going to talk about two reports that we have produced, and I think you have both of them. One of them is our report to the Living Wage Working Group, and one of them is about our living wage calculation with an update on labor market data. The working group report came out in February 2023. The calculation report came out in November 2023. So I just want to start with kind of the main points. I get asked a lot about these things, and I mean, the first question that comes up a lot is, what is the living wage and how do you calculate it? So it's right now, as of last November, it's $18.45 an hour. This is based on a basic subsistence budget for a single person, a little more than $38,000 a year. We divide that by 2,000 roughly to create an hourly wage. It does not include health care. If it did include, it does not include child care. If it did include child care, it would be much higher because child care costs anywhere between $19K to $25K for full-time child care. It's similar to or lower than other living wage calculations, so we're quite aligned actually with another widely used measure, the MIT measure. There's a housing living wage that is much higher. So yeah, we use a very similar methodology to the one that has been used for many years by Alternatives Federal Credit Union. We have, the ILR school has kind of taken over the task of calculating it, and we're using more fine-grained county-specific data to produce this number. We'll have a new one in November. So the demographics of the workforce making less than a living wage, it's about 18,000 workers who are making less than the 1845 number. This is about 38.5%. We've calculated this a few times using ACS data, and it comes out, it always comes out basically similar. There are gender disparities, there are racial disparities, there are ethnic disparities. The biggest one is between black workers and the rest of, and everyone else. It's about 60, if you're a black worker, you have a 60% probability of making less than a living wage. That is a lot less than the workforce as a whole, 38.5%. The third thing is some people say, well, this number is not high enough. And the reason why it seems so low to so many people around here is that the living wage, the cost of living is increasing rapidly. We just heard about housing. Based on data that is coming out from the MIT calculator, we think that the next living wage number will be about $24. It will increase by about $5. This is going to be a much more rapid increase than the minimum wage. So our living wage number is lagged, so it goes up after the cost of living goes up because we have to wait for the data to come out. So it's important, the fourth point is that it's really important to recognize what employers are doing because wages are going up. The thing is, overall, they're lagging inflation, and there are big differences between sectors. So in the most recent year of, in 2022 to 23, there was a big increase in wages in leisure and hospitality, 9.3%. But this was much faster than our much bigger sector that dominates the local economy, that accounts for about half of workers. This is education and healthcare, so-called EDS and MEDS, and wages there were really lagging inflation and increases in the cost of living. We've also, just following data that's coming out, are finding that wages are increasing more slowly in Ithaca than almost any other MSA, metropolitan area in the United States, and that includes college towns. I did some calculations where I saw we are at or near the bottom of college towns in terms of wage growth. So we have a real problem here, and so, yeah, the question is what we are going to do about it. I just want to drill down for the rest of the presentation in some specific topics that we've looked at. One is the comparison between our county and the surrounding counties. So here you see our living wage number, $18.45, and then you see numbers for counties, adjacent counties, and others in the region, and you'll see that we have the highest living wage number than in the region. You'll also see that there is no county in our region where the living wage number is as low as the minimum wage. Broome County is the lowest, $14.59. That's from 2023 when the minimum wage was $14.20. This is produced by Rusty Weaver, our data scientist in the Buffalo office. Another thing I'd like to just draw your attention to is the process of the living wage working group. So we had a pretty broad membership of activists, employers, elected people, and we wanted to really figure out what people wanted from a living wage, how they thought they could benefit from it, and we also wanted to know what people's concerns were. And this was not, our research questions didn't just come from what people in the working group were thinking. We actually went out and canvassed and organized information gathering sessions where people answered quite open-ended questions about this. And so, you know, this is what set our agenda. So the positives were workers would be happier, more empowered and satisfied at work. They would work better, they'd be more efficient, punctual, focused. They could afford better the necessities of life. They could save, they could give to charity, and they get more control over their time because they would need to work fewer hours and they could do other things other than working, such as volunteering or education. But of course, there were also disadvantages and concerns. There were concerns about really the complex, difficult problems that employers face when they're managing people and dealing with the labor market. A big, probably the biggest issue that employers talked with us about in this and in the employer study was wage compression, which I'll get to in a few minutes. There are also concerns about wage push inflation, that this would cause wages and taxes to increase, problems with benefits cliffs. So the last time I was in this room, I was asked about our benefits cliffs simulations. I'll talk about those too in a few minutes. And then there was this question about affordability. Employers will struggle to pay for wage increases. So let's talk about benefits cliffs for a minute. I think you all know what benefits cliffs are. The issue is that if the minimum wage goes up, workers who are receiving means-tested benefits will no longer be eligible for some of those benefits. The resources available to their families will drop, taking into account both wage increases and loss in benefits. So in order to figure out how big of a problem this would be, we did some calculations where we looked at data on benefit recipiency. We were pretty comprehensive and looked at all the main benefits that people around here are receiving. We looked at the rules of those benefits, and then we looked at kind of a big data set of wage earners. And the finding was that, yes, benefits cliffs do affect people. It's about between 2% and 4% of families who have a wage earner whose wages are brought up by a minimum wage increase, depending on, we calculated it at several different levels. But what we found out is that the more rapid the minimum wage increase, the lower the percentage of workers who are affected by benefits cliffs. The reason for that is if you're making higher wages, at some point those higher wages are going to compensate you for the value of those benefits that are lost. Now the big benefits to look at are Medicaid and housing assistance, Section 8. And so if you look at the report, you can see more detail about who is disproportionately affected. But, you know, a broader point is 96 to 98% of households who have a wage earner whose wages go up because of this minimum wage increase do not face benefits cliffs. For them, it is just purely an increase in income. So I just want to say a little bit about the employer interviews. So the interviews are now kind of old. We did 2 waves, 2019 and 2021. And we often hear, well, things have changed a lot for employers, and it's just a different time now than back then. The thing is, though, actually, back then they were talking about shortages of workers. Just in both phases, the biggest problem was wage compression. Actually, there is some continuity in the challenges that employers face. Moreover, their views are really quite varied. They change and are different. So we had employers who were in favor of it and thought it would be great. There are other employers who were against it. There were employers who said it would cost them a lot of money and they didn't know how to pay it. But there were also employers who said, well, this will cost us little or nothing. There was a lot of uncertainty about it with some employers where they said it's impossible to figure it out because we don't know how we will adapt. It depends on a lot of unknowns. One thing that happened, though, is some employers in the sample who were opposed the first time around were in favor of the second time around. So, yeah, it's a big, so it's hard to, this is an ugly, complex table, and I guess the point is it's really hard to characterize generally what employers think about it and how it will affect them. The final slide I want to put up is just about different occupations and different and wage increases. So the compression issue it affects different occupations and sectors differently. So in the care economy, it's a much bigger issue than in other services. The problem in care economy occupations like healthcare and support, personal care and service is that the median is going up relatively slowly, but the bottom is coming up more rapidly. So you compare that to other big service occupations with a lot of low-wage workers like sales and related or food preparation and serving. Here you see more rapid increases in the median wage and yeah, very similar levels of increase between the median and the 25th percentile. So yeah, I just want to conclude by thanking you for inviting me to talk about our research and really look forward to your questions and comments.
All right, I'll open it up to members of the committee for comments or Veronica?
Mostly just thank you for coming to present. I know I've gotten to hear most of this before, but I just want to highlight the legislators at least got this little 2-page summary of how making Tompkins County's minimum wage into a living wage would likely affect workers, government, and businesses. So I'd encourage us all to take a look at that, and I am excited to move forward with this because I think I'm hearing like a lot of potential positives and few and conquerable negatives.
Just for full clarity, this is in the agenda packet. I think it actually made it into the agenda packet twice.
The 2-pager?
The 2-pager.
Oh, wow.
It was on the link, or no, sorry. I apologize. I'm looking at my notes, and I imported it into my notes, so I apologize. It did not make the agenda packet. So again, I have one blunder usually each meeting, and that was my blunder for today. I put it into my notes twice. But we can circulate that to the rest of the legislature for their review and consideration as well.
Great, thank you.
And thanks for sending that over. Just to sort of highlight what that document that Veronica was mentioning covered is essentially how the proposal would affect workers, how the proposal could affect county government, and the proposal being why Tompkins County's minimum wage should be a living wage, and then also how the proposal affects businesses. And it goes into a number of various points with references, et cetera. So we'll make that available to folks, and I know Mike Sigler also had questions.
I just have really 2 questions. I mean, the first being, I didn't see this in here, but I know other countries, they have accommodations for youth employment and things like that. I didn't know if that was a consideration in any of this. I think pretty much every Western country has that.
Yeah, some do.
More than some. In Australia, France, Belgium.
Can I tack a question onto that, which is like currently with the minimum wage as it is, do we have exceptions for youth employment or other things?
Statewide, there's no, youth workers have to make the same minimum wage in the state.
We do have it when we agreed for the city to come on board with the living wage. We did make that exception for youth workers back then.
We do still have that with our living wage certification. Employers with youth under 18 get paid less.
But they do still have to make the like state mandated living wage.
Minimum wage.
Or, sorry, wishful thinking, minimum wage.
So if we were to go ahead with something like this would become the minimum wage and would wipe that out.
Unless, the legislation could be drafted in what, I'm not suggesting that, but it could be drafted in a specific way. I'm not suggesting that youth should get paid less, but that could be a possibility.
No, I mean, it's a good point, and it's something that comes up a lot when talking about this. So there are people who believe that younger workers don't deserve it because they're supported by their families. And for that reason, there are policy arguments for having a lower minimum wage for younger workers. The counter argument is that working class families need the money, especially if there's with this high cost of living. And so that's another consideration that you will probably want to take into account.
My other question, I guess, would be, I mean, this is not evidence, obviously, this is anecdotal, but I know that the Dunkin' Donuts in Lansing is paying something along the lines of $8.50 an hour, so
$8.50?
No, $18.50.
Oh, sorry.
I heard $8.52.
Yeah, it's like.
We're going to go
I guess
up there.
I just see a disconnect, kind of, like, I understand what the report said that recently came out, and I found it hard to believe, because that is just, I mean, I go into a lot of businesses, and that's simply not what a starting salary is in this county.
Yeah, so this is why we follow the data, and you know, when new data sources come out, there are quite a few different ones out there. We take a look at them and rerun our calculations. And, you know, we've been doing this for a few years now. Throughout that time, we hear quite often, look at Borg Warner, look at the number they're advertising, look at the number that Dunkin' is advertising. Occasionally, I will take a picture of them because I think it might come in handy in these presentations I do. But yeah, I mean, okay, employers advertise these numbers because they think they will be attractive to workers who are making less than that. So that kind of explains to me why when you see these numbers advertised, they are at or above the living wage number. So they're drawing on a large pool of workers that are making less than that. This is something actually that employers talked about in interviews as a big problem or solution to the labor shortage is approaching workers at other businesses. And of course, yeah, what is a solution to one employer is a big problem for another.
Ian?
Yeah, so with that point, tagging on to what Mike said, there are some employers, because of after COVID or during COVID, that they've raised their wages, and there's a shortage of workers, and then there's also a bunch of people that said, hey, I'm not going to work for this little bit, so they're going to try and fill up in those maybe better jobs. Or at least higher paying jobs, and sometimes less strenuous, perhaps. So in some ways, this is possibly a good time for us to have this conversation, because some employers have already raised it because there's a need there. So if we looked into this, you know, this is not our discussion today, but if we were to talk about it further, you know, it might not be as big of an impact on a lot of employers, because we're already seeing this increase. And this would be to kind of keep that versus the market changes and then the wages go down. But so just thinking about getting to your presentation, or, you know, I appreciate this, you know, I've heard a lot of it before, and this is really, there's a lot of details in there. So just one question, because I know we're pressed for time, we have a lot on our agenda today, but because the folks that could hit the benefits cliff, because that's been asked many times of us. So, and I can't access, my computer's not accessing the agenda, so I know there's more information in there. You said 2 to 4% could be hitting that benefits cliff, and do you have a number then? What does that translate into, the number of folks that might hit that benefits cliff?
Oh, gosh. So the numbers are calculated New York statewide, or upstate New York wide. I would need to get back to you to come up with a number. Also, it's kind of an old calculation.
Right.
From, I forget when we did it. And so it's, so the 2 to 4% is based on the percentage of households who have a wage earner who would benefit from a minimum wage increase. So this really depends on the level at which you set the minimum wage. So if you set it at a level where it brings up the wages of 18,000 workers, it will be some percentage of that 18,000, or at least the number of households that is. And it would be on the lower end of that number because that would be a really big increase in the minimum wage. So that doesn't answer your question. In order to answer it, we have to do some more calculations.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment then that it was very interesting what you said as far as for the benefits cliff, rather than kind of, sorry for the analogy of slowly pushing people, raising slowly the minimum wage into a living wage, of slowly pushing people off the cliff. It's kind of better just to jump. People are going to land better off. It sounds like with a higher jump in the wage.
Well,
There's
this is
softer landing, kind of.
When Kathy Hochul, or when I learned what the plan is for increasing the minimum wage in 50-cent increments, my first thought was the benefits cliff simulations show that is absolutely the wrong approach. If you want to avoid benefits cliffs, what you're going to do with that approach is increase poverty and create tough decisions for people and employers. And of course our calculation assumes that people won't change their working times. So there are workarounds, employers can talk with their employers and work fewer hours and avoid it. Or they can increase their hours a lot and get enough wages to compensate. But yeah. This is the benefits cliffs thing is an argument against slow minimum wage increases, not against big, ambitious ones.
Thank you.
Veronica?
This is just an anecdote, but out of curiosity, I popped on Indeed.com looking for jobs, put in Ithaca, New York within 25 miles, no other filters, so we're getting registered nurses and things. And it's telling me that for pay $15 an hour and greater, there are 2,269 jobs, pay $17.50 an hour and greater, because these are just the built-in things, 1,735 jobs. So about a quarter of the jobs are advertising pay under $17.50.
I'll take the last question unless there's other questions. I just wanted to be clear, I think it was on slide 2 of your presentation. You're saying that the living wage will likely increase next year to $24?
We are going to recalculate it and announce the new number in November. So we'll look at the expenditure data and we're going to use a methodology that is very similar to the MIT calculation, which came out in February. So the day after the MIT calculation came out, I got an email from one of the minimum wage campaigners in New York State saying, "Why is your living wage number so low? It should be 24. MIT calculator says 24." And we took a look at it and we said, we came to the conclusion this is where our number is probably headed to. Of course, we have to do the calculations, we have to see, but yeah, we think it will be a much bigger increase than we have ever seen before.
Okay. Well, we'll look for those numbers when they're available. I know others will probably look more forward to them I appreciate you both taking the time and kicking off this conversation here. We'll work with members of the committee and members of the legislature to see what level of appetite there is to bring this conversation more to fruition and through the committee and through the legislative process. So I guess that's all I can say for today, but we look forward to working with you both and exploring the possibilities and how to improve, our local workforce and economy and all of those things as it takes workers and employers and academic partners and nonprofits to bring this all together. So we appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Greg. Thanks for everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
All right, next up, with a few minutes to spare, Heather McDaniels from the Tompkins County, why am I? Ithaca Area Economic Development. I'm sorry, I went back to TCIDA and then I was like, sorry.
It's okay, I get called a lot of names and, I answer to many of them.
Give her 4 things or TC something.
I know, well, yeah, that's Tompkins County Development Corporation. It's like you're known by many names, so Heather, welcome. I guess this is my second snafu for the meeting, so.
No worries. I hate to be sitting between you and the end of this meeting and this beautiful day outside, so I will be brief. I do have a report in my in your agenda packet, as well as the memo just outlining the current IDA and Development Corporation fund balance. I'd like to highlight a couple of things. Our Economic Development Resource Partners are acting as the oversight committee and client committee for a countywide comprehensive plan this year. We, for the first time, I think, have RFP'd and read through 7 really phenomenal proposals from consultants all over the country and unanimously chose Koreman Associates. They're based out of Saratoga, and so we'll be kicking off probably about a 9-month comprehensive, did I say comprehensive plan? I'm sorry. It's a good thing Katie's not still here. She'd be going, oh, Heather, that's not your thing. Economic development strategy. Scratch comprehensive plan. That's Katie's thing. Economic development strategy. We'll be kicking off a 9-month process probably in the next couple of weeks. There will be some public engagement and some key stakeholder engagement. So I'm hoping all of you at the table will have an opportunity to weigh in during that process. I heard yesterday from the Regional Economic Development Council, it is not public yet, but I wasn't told it was private. So I'm shouting from the mountaintops that there is funding, I don't know how much funding, going to be available for pro-housing designated communities for infrastructure and other placemaking activities. It will be a 50% match and available for municipalities and not-for-profit organizations. I don't know anything else. I don't know what will be eligible yet. It is supposed to be released on May 13th. So as soon as it is, I will be distributing that to municipalities. So for any of you who represent a town or a village that has not yet applied to be a pro-housing community, I would encourage you to be talking to your towns and villages about the benefits of that. You may already be aware there was $650 million in the governor's budget for pro-housing communities. We have yet to hear what all that funding will be for. Our direct-to-work cohort, our first one of 2024, is just wrapping up with assessments this week and testing for the nationally recognized entry-level manufacturing training certificate. We intend to run 3 programs this year, and that was a really fascinating report and conversation around living wage, and I was glad to hear that. All of our manufacturing partners, we have 8 of them. In order to partner, they have to tell us that their entry-level wage will be the living wage. And we would like to have more participants in our program. It's really been a learning experience working with the social service agencies and other referral partners. I think we did a much better job this time. We're getting better every time we do it and really building partnerships and collaboration to get referrals into the program. But what we are seeing, you know, this time we had 20 people come in and, you know, a good number of them have other issues that need to be addressed in order for them to be prepared to go into a training program and then go direct to work. The big ones that we're seeing are housing, stable, permanent housing, childcare, and transportation, access to vehicles or other means to get to employment. And I'm not going to talk any more about that, but I'm really excited about, I think we have 6 graduates. Hopefully they'll all pass the test. I heard it was the best cohort that we've had so far. We started with 20 came in, we invited 8, and 1 ended up they had to leave the program, and then 1 ended up had another issue. So we ended up with 6 completing the program. I think that's great. They all went and toured all 8 manufacturers. And I will tell you, for the manufacturers, it's like the Hunger Games. They want the employees. So these young folks will, not all young folks, but ready to work folks will have their choice of employers to interview with. And then you should have all received invitations to IAED's annual meeting that's taking place in 2 weeks. We have a hard number of seats, in a very hard stop at the number of seats in the room, and we are almost full. So if anyone is wanting to RSVP and it bounces back as full, let me know, and I can maybe
it did
find
earlier
a couple
today,
of chairs.
And
earlier today
but the
it did. We fixed it.
Tried again for me. Yep, and I got in.
Good. Thanks, Annie. And that's all I have, unless anyone has questions for me.
Just, Heather, I appreciate it. I always love hearing about the workforce development things, and you guys are doing a killer job, really hitting that. Excited to learn more at a future point about Tompkins Build, and there's a good chunk of paragraph in your report about that, which is sort of the next direct to work, you know, from manufacturing and then to building trades. So excited to see what's coming there. And also to point out that we did also have a IDA, the Ithaca Industrial Development, why am I blanking on the A? Agency, sorry, I'm having a really hard time today.
That's okay.
And then the Tompkins County Development Corporation fund balance was also included in the agenda packet.
Yes.
Any questions for Heather? All right, well, Heather, I appreciate, thanks for sticking with us through the agenda, and look forward to the IAED annual meeting in a couple weeks, and our next opportunity to interact. So thanks again for making the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, any committee members' reports? Veronica.
Today is International Workers' Day, celebrating labor solidarity and workers themselves. Happy May Day.
Thank you for that. Any other committee members' reports? All right, seeing none, if I could have a motion.
I just wanted to say real quick, our Community Housing Development Fund meeting is coming up. Let me find the day. May 16th, so I know you said you'd go, and I hope Travis can go. So that's the 16th at 1 p.m., and I believe we're going to be in person.
Great.
So you can't go.
Okay. If I could have a motion to adjourn. Moved by Veronica, seconded by Travis. All those in favor? That's usually unanimous. So thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.